Namaskar. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe concluded a successful bilateral visit to India for the annual summit-level meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi over the weekend. The two sides worked out an in-principle agreement on civil nuclear cooperation, which will open a new chapter in the relations between the two countries. The two sides inked key defense agreements, one concerning the transfer of defense equipment and technology, and another related to security measures for protection of classified military information. The economic partnership has been strong, and apart from infrastructure development, Japan is keen to collaborate with India on innovative technologies to mitigate climate change. Besides supporting investments into India, the rail network is an area that could see a lot of progress in the future, with modernization of railway stations and the launch of high-speed rail networks. Soon after the summit on Saturday, I caught up with Yasuhisa Kawamura, the spokesperson of the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. There's a great understanding between Prime Minister Abe as well as Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Both Prime Ministers have a good understanding and a rapport of each other, and the relationship is a special strategic and global partnership. And we are very privileged to have with us the spokesperson of the Japanese Prime Minister, Mr. Kawamura, to give us an idea about what has happened during this visit. There is a strong economic basis to this relationship. There is a commitment of $34 billion over the next 5 years in investments. There is also the SEPA, and well, there's bullet trains also, which were agreed today.
Economic area is also an important sector for today's agreement between the two leaders. The strong Japan is the best interest of India, and strong India is the best interest of Japan. This is the eloquent expression of the necessity of both countries for further collaborations. The economic area is one of the promising areas for furtherance of joint actions. The Shinkansen system, which has also been announced today, between the Mumbai and the Ahmedabad, for the final realization of this plan of the Shinkansen system for India's high-speed rail plan. We're happy to cooperate further with Indian government. For facilitation of business opportunities, Japan today also announced a new business facilitation mechanism amounting to 1.5 trillion yen for Japanese corporations who would think of investing in India or coming to India to establish the entities to export. And for ODA, Offshore Development Assistance, in order to attain the goal of the high-quality infrastructure building, which is the requirement for a sustainable and continuous growth of the Indian economy. This year, we may provide 400 billion yen loan projects for India's efforts towards that goal. So the Make India on the side of India, and Japanese provision of the high-quality infrastructure building.
Also, since it is a strategic partnership, there is the defense aspect as well. And, a lot has been talked about defense cooperation. There was the US-2 amphibious plane. What progress has been made on this?
Well, as for the US-2 airplane consultations, we agree to continue such talks. And as for the general environment for defense corporations, today, again, the two leaders have made an announcement that reached an agreement of the transfer of defense technologies and defense equipment, and also the protection of the information. So those agreements will provide the more secure and assured the environment for both authorities to talk about the collaborations in the coming years.
Since we talk at a time when the world is focused on climate change, in what areas, new areas of cooperation can we see? In
the issue of the smart city, for example, our two countries' governments have been conducting consultations and exchange information in how two countries could cooperate. New technology, innovations. With the use of the new technology for innovative purposes, we can contribute for the world's efforts in reducing the GHG emission controls. So those points and Japanese contribution to COP21, Prime Minister Abe explained to Prime Minister Modi. They had a very good exchange of views on this regard.
Another big global issue is terrorism. In the area of counterterrorism, is there some area of cooperation?
Most important thing for the counterterrorism challenge is to share the information about the terrorist movement and so forth, and share the experiences of dealing with this challenge. Japan and India are in cooperations in such area, and will enhance our collaborations for further development in this area.
And how do you see the future, sir, of this relationship?
Well, Japanese visitors are increasing as the Japanese investors continuously look for the business opportunities here. So in both sides of the efforts, I think the people recognize the historic and ties of the cultural heritage, but at the same time, in actual terms, that they'll find the mission, so to speak, to work together and develop together.
Mr. Kawamura, thank you very much for talking to Doordarshan. Well, and to understand the importance of a strong India for Japan, we have with us in the studio Commodore C. Uday Bhaskar, who is the Director of the Society for Policy Studies, as well as a well-known security and strategic affairs analyst. We have with us Dr. Arvind Veermani, former Executive Director of the International Monetary Fund and also former Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India. And we have Vibhav Kant Upadhyay, the Chairman of the India Centre Foundation, and who has been closely working for about 20 plus years in developing India-Japan ties. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us. We'll start with you, Commodore Uday Bhaskar. The focus on the Navy. You know, there is this impression that India has a strong naval presence, or could develop into a much stronger naval presence, which would be in the interests of Japan. And that is why that amphibious plane, the collaboration, also, Malabar exercises, and also a lot more talk and collaboration with the United States and Australia with regard to the sea lanes.
Clearly, if you look at the joint statement that was issued after Prime Minister Abe's visit, I would say that the maritime domain and the strategic significance of the maritime domain comes into very, very clear focus. And this is evident in the first few paragraphs of the joint statement, where to me as an analyst, what was very, very instructive is both sides are now referring to the extended Indo-Pacific, meaning that till recently we had always thought that India was looking at the Indian Ocean and that Japan was a Pacific power. Now both countries are committed to what they see as the responsibilities that devolve upon them for the security, safety, stability of the extended maritime continuum from the Pacific to the Indian Ocean. I found that something which was quite uncharacteristic, meaning India and Japan have always been very reticent about assuming any kind of global role or a regional role. Whereas the subtext of the statement was a very, very, I would say, clear focus on the strategic underpinning, the political and strategic profile that the two countries envisage for themselves. And within that, yes, the naval aspect. And I think the clarity with which both countries have now said Japan will be part of the Malabar exercises. You'll remember in the past, because of China's sensitivities, India had sort of tried to keep this, in a very ambiguous manner. The reference to Japan now being a regular partner of Malabar, the reference to the India-Australia, and perhaps with Japan, meaning that we are extending the ambit. So I found these very instructive, and I could see the resolve that both Prime Ministers bring to the table in terms of Asia and the strategic framework.
Dr. Veermani, a lot of money being put out, $12.4 billion, 1.5 trillion yen is what they say. For new investments into India. India, the bright spot, one would say, isn't it?
Let me put briefly into perspective. We have for many decades, off and on, as part of first as the Look East policy, etc., wanted a much closer economic relation with Japan,
Absolutely.
but it's not really worked out. And kind of when I look back, the model is what the Japanese did in Thailand, in Malaysia, and Indonesia. So I think we finally got to the point where this closer interaction that both the government and bureaucracy of Japan and the private sector are one, and on our side the same thing, that this is finally going to happen. And given that how effectively Japan has used technological catch-up, given that we are part of Asia and the Industrial Revolution started somewhere else, how effectively the Japanese use technology for economic development, I think it's a very, very good thing that we are finally getting to that stage where Japanese will hopefully, now it looks like, play a much greater role in India's economic development.
Mr. Upadhyay, how important is Japan in India's Act East policy?
Very important, but before I answer that, I would like you to understand, it's understanding of India-Japan relationship is very recent in India. Up to now, we always saw this as a bilateral relationship. It's no more bilateral.
It's
we
global.
have to be very careful in understanding what the word means. India-Japan global partnership. It's the India-Japan who is going to work together, put their strengths together for the global presence, for global purpose. And what is that purpose? Very few people have understood, and very few people are addressing that. In 2000, when this India-Japan global partnership was announced, a lot of work was put behind that. It was a framework. It was a vision of Prime Minister Bajpayee, with whom we worked very closely. That India-Japan global partnership, exactly what France and Germany did in European Union, which is today the European Union, 50 years back.
Okay.
They co-created a development model. And this is exactly India-Japan is trying to create an alternative development model, which is energy efficient, environment responsible, and sustainable, which can be spread into ASEAN, GCC, Africa, and any other country.
Sure.
And if time allows, I will later tell you why this is being decided like that.
Commodore Uday Bhaskar, India is a positive force then, in a net security provider for the region, if we look at it from that point of view. And the maritime security dimension, one has to understand it from the point of view of a rising presence of China, or probably the dwindling presence of the United States. And that's the way some analysts are looking at it. Because the US had an overwhelming naval presence in the world, but of late it has been reducing its expenditure on the Navy. The Chinese have increased their expenditure and also are pushing themselves into the South China Sea areas. And India's a possible India-Japan as a collaboration is possibly a counterweight.
Yeah, I think I would, characterize it in the following manner, that after the end of the Cold War, which is 1991 to where we are now, we are looking at roughly something like 25 years. And there has been a certain flux in terms of how the global strategic order, the global economic order, and the global political order is really, I think, trying to find the equivalent of a new status quo. Because we had a certain kind of pattern in the Cold War. It's taken us 25 years. And perhaps one of the central features is the rise of China and the relative decline of the United States, as also the European Union, for a variety of reasons, and the emergence of powers like India, Brazil, and what are commonly referred to as the emerging economies.
Right.
And I think India is trying to position itself in the most appropriate manner. And in that context, whether we look at it in a strategic context, political context, economic context, the India-Japan relationship will have a very, very critical impact on how this contour is going to finally, shall we say, map out. And the China factor comes into that. In the interest of time, I would say that for a long time, China's endeavor has been to have the equivalent of a bipolar global order, which is the US and China. China wants to be accommodated at the global level, but they want a unipolar Asia, which China would punctuate and inhabit. The Abe visit, to my mind, has sent a very strong signal that it will not be a unipolar Asia, and that Asia would have to accommodate the aspirations of both India and Japan.
Sure.
And that, to me, is the big picture that the Abe visit has brought.
Dr. Veermani, the offshore development assistance that Japan has put into India has helped in so many infrastructure projects. There's the Delhi Metro, for one, to talk about. There is the dedicated freight corridor. There's going to be industrial corridors, townships. You know, there's talk of the Chennai-Bangalore industrial corridor, many mega projects, and we heard that there's going to be 400 billion yen also being put in this year itself. How important is this from the Japanese point of view to invest so heavily in infrastructure with soft loans for the long term, when you look at it as a former executive director of IMF in developing infrastructure in a country where you're holding a close relationship?
So, there's two ways to connect it. One is with what I was saying earlier, the economic and technological development of India, which this government has made a centerpiece of its foreign policy. But let me also connect it to what Uday just said, which is in the Asian kind of semi-global context, which has to do with connectivity. I think there is, though we have not seen that yet, I expect there to be much more. For example, there's already a little provision here for the Northeast. I think it's very important, for example, in the context of the OROB of China, that we develop a Southern Asian corridor. And there again, Japan and the ADB, which Japan leads the ADB, as you know, it's the president of the ADB is Japanese and so on, and it's the biggest shareholder. That, I think, is also going to be an important role in this kind of strategic context, not just the Indian Ocean. Secondly, aspect which again I think Uday would agree with, has mentioned, is the production side, the defense production, which you kind of gave some indication earlier, is going to be a very important component, because here on defense production we can actually be more like equals, as against, for example, vis-a-vis the US, for example, which is much more technologically advanced. Vis-a-vis
and it's going
the
to
Japanese,
be make in India. It's going to be make in India. With
vis-a-vis the Japanese, we are in some sense, we have some very strong capabilities, they have some, and this combination really will be greatly beneficial to both countries.
Mr. Upadhyay, in terms of future areas, I mean, you have worked also in energy efficiency, in smart knowledge, agriculture corridors. These are some of the initiatives that you are taking forward with the two countries. What kind of progress in new areas? Because over there also we heard the spokesperson keen on smart cities, innovative technologies. What do you think is the future there?
I will go back to the last statement I gave. The reason why India-Japan came together is to create an alternative development model for Asia, for humanity. Why it is the need? Because the old model, which is not only which symbolized for limited aspiration and unlimited resources, after 400 years we stand exactly reverse: limited resources and unlimited aspirations. So we cannot develop this new world, the present world, the undeveloped areas with the old model, which is exploitative in nature also. So we have to be using the empowerment as a new model. So Japan and India agreed, okay, let's make this happen, starting from India, which is 1/6 of humanity. And if this model works, we can take it forward to the rest of the world. World will like it. It's an open source. It's like a Linux in computers, And people can learn from, say, Africa. So the initiatives, if you see, whether it's a DMIC, which I very closely work with, not then Prime Minister, he was the Deputy Cabinet Minister, Cabinet Secretary of the Koizmi's government, Prime Minister Abe. DMIC was also the same thought process, how we can bring the energy, environment and sustainability balance sheets to a smartness level, that how we can, instead of SEZs, we can create this, corridors. The same corridors are now logically extended to Chennai, Bangalore and other areas also. The corridor you just mentioned about agriculture is basically proposed by our foundation now to between Amritsar and Dhanakuni,
Okay.
because the main industrial content of this whole belt, is Gangetic belt, is knowledge,
Right.
tourism, and agriculture.
But
economy,
Mr. Upadhyay, what is the level of private-to-private partnership, business-to-business partnership between the two countries, and how is that growing? Because we understand at the political level, at the government level, there's a lot of cooperation, and
Yes.
things look very good.
You know, the cycle of nation building is like dinosaur life, you know, and the business cycles are like dog life, you know, they're like 5 years, 10 years.
Okay.
India-Japan global partnership, the breakthrough happened in 2000. And from 2000, the vision was set. Then we went to the framework setting. Then we went to set up the initiatives. Now projects are happening.
Okay.
And now execution and empowerment will happen. So it took us more than 10 years. See, DMIC was conceived in 2002.
Yes.
But it took 6 years just to incorporate it in 2008.
Okay.
You know, so now once it is coming to the project level, so there are a lot of excitement of this trip, but I would like to say
Okay.
this excitement is happening because there is a 20 years of work between
Absolutely.
India and Japan, which has come slowly and slowly. And
Nobody's
now-
saying that it's happened overnight. It
Yes.
has obviously been, there's always been work behind the scenes. Comrade Uday Bhaskar, let's talk a little bit about the trilateral dialogue as well, because there are other strategic partners of Japan, which are both the US and Australia, and India is involved in trilateral dialogue with Japan, with both these countries. What do you make of this? And this is something quite unique.
Well, what I make of this is that India, I think, is now bringing greater clarity and assertiveness in terms of its strategic profile as far as Asia is concerned. And the way in which India is approaching is that it is nobody's case that India is going to become a military ally of country A, B, or C. A for America. And in as much as Japan and Australia are formally in a military alliance with the United States, where they have the status of a subaltern partner, a junior partner, India is making it out that clear to the others that we will engage, whether it is with a Japan
Okay.
or with an Australia.
Sure.
But the suggestion that this is a military alliance against China is completely invalid.
Yes.
Which is why, for instance, since we speak about the maritime domain, in February, India is having a very major international fleet review. And in a way, it is an expression of India's credibility as what you earlier said, the net security provider in the Indian Ocean area. And it's going to see many major navies participating, including China.
Okay.
So I think the signal that India is sending out is that where India's interests are directly impacted, we will engage
Okay.
with whichever country is relevant.
Sure.
But we will not compromise on what we see as the kind of autonomy that we want
Okay.
in making our choices.
Dr. Veermani, you want to comment on this?
Let
or?
me just add the economic dimensions
Yeah.
of the strategic thing. You've got
Sure.
to remember that Japan has been a resource importer and most of its oil goes through this area. So it's very
Okay.
important for them. You know, when we say how is India going to be important for Japan, it's their oil. Used to be going,
Fair
some
enough.
of it was from Indonesia, but Indonesia is now becoming a net importer, will be soon. So it's really very important, this protection and open seas, the movement of oil cargoes, etc. So
Sure,
India
fair enough.
really
but I
will be
want to ask you
contributing.
about the rail networks,
Right.
Dr. Veermani. You know, they were also interested in cleaning up our stations, because from when you look at developing good stations, from there you develop the tracks, and then you also develop the high speed network. So it's a very long-term vision. You know, it's not just the Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed rail that they're talking about right now, which has been signed. There's going to be, and Indian Railways certainly needed some sort of, some sort of investment and some sort of new,
So-
a new kind of investment.
No, that's a good question. But in some sense, the railway platforms and the immediate upgradation, in some sense, China and others can do. I think for Japan collaboration, it's more important to think like 8 years in the future when this corridor, the rail high speed will be completed. It's going to
Yes.
be several years.
Yes.
And it's that technological development and acquisition of skills
Sure.
that will help us in the future. So think 8 to 16 years or whatever. So it's really more futuristic.
Okay.
You know, the immediate things, there are lots of others, you know, including the Chinese who can do, but it's the future which really we can
Right.
do together. In
We've
some
run
sense.
very short of time, Mr. Upadhyay, so quickly, I mean, how would you like to sum it up, this kind of relationship, which we know we can talk about it at length because there's so much more to be put into to talk about it. What do you see as are the key areas of focus for, let's say, the next 5 years?
See, there are three components in India-Japan relationship. One is what India can do for Japan, what Japan can do for India, and what India-Japan together can do for the rest of the world. That is why we have to be, thinking towards it, what we can do together for the rest of the world, like bullet train, I'm saying.
Yes.
While making bullet train in India, I will like our policymakers and decision makers to think in the terms that this technology we can develop together and localize and try to make it affordable for other parts of the world. And if India, Japan together can take it to the other areas. Similarly, in other areas also, we should be thinking in this global partnership thought process perspective. And sky is the limit. Okay,
fair enough. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us here on this special discussion. Well, Japan has strongly supported India's development. Japanese ODA continues to provide long-term loans for India's infrastructure development. The Delhi Metro is a reality with Japanese assistance. They also helped conceptualize and execute this project. There's the Western Dedicated Freight Corridor, the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor with 8 new industrial townships. The Chennai-Bengaluru Industrial Corridor are all mega projects on the anvil which will transform India in the next decade. Well, besides this, there is collaboration on strategic and maritime issues, a trilateral dialogue with Japan's other strategic partners, which is Australia and the United States. And in the words of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, this strategic partnership will shape the course of Asia. Thanks very much for being with us. Namaskar.